Last night at halftime, Bob Costas talked about the Redskins nickname, and that gave his opinion on that. The timing of that, if you're looking at the Redskins playing the Cowboys, comparing the nickname to what college teams have done, where the Miami Redskins changed their nickname. The Red Storm with St. John's. Stanford Cardinal became, they changed their nickname from the Stanford Indians. Dartmouth did the same. And every time Bob has done this, if he's had a moment where he sort of colors outside the lines, to me, that he's actually got the guts to be able to do this. But he did it when we talked about gun control. People said not the right place at the right time. Last night, people still said the same thing. Bob Costas joins us now. Reaction, pro and con on this, Bob. What's it been so far?
Well, I just woke up, but from what I've been able to determine from NBC people, it's much more muted than the gun thing. And any negative reaction comes from an extreme fringe. I had much more time this time. The difference, as you know, between 1 minute and 2 minutes is much greater in television than the difference between 2 minutes and 3 minutes. You have enough time to develop a thought. And even if someone disagreed, I don't think they could misunderstand where I was coming from. And I'm sure many people saw it, but for those who didn't, my point was, this is not about a political correctness. This nonsense that Braves or Warriors or Chiefs is automatically offensive is silly. But Redskins, if you take a step back, we've become used to it because it's been in common usage for so long. But if you take a step back and you think of what the equivalent of Redskins would be, if applied to an African American, an Hispanic, an Asian, or any other ethnic group, then you have to start thinking of it a different way. Or put it in these terms. If you were to walk into a gathering of Native Americans, if you were on a reservation or happened to come across a family of Native Americans in a restaurant and you began conversing with them, would you feel comfortable referring to them as Redskins, using the term Redskins over and over again? Once you take a step back, it's very obvious. And that was the point that I was making. I wasn't even calling for a specific action, although I was implying it. What I was asking the audience to do was to consider that even though, and I went out of my way to say this, clearly no offense is intended. No one should think that Dan Snyder or any NFL official wishes to disrespect, consciously wishes to disrespect Native Americans. But even though no offense is intended, isn't it clear, if you're fair, to see how some offense could legitimately be taken? Not necessarily by all Native Americans. I noted that the best polling we have at this point, we may get new polling, but the best polling we have at this point says that a majority of Native Americans say it's not particularly an issue for them. But for many, it is. And I was just asking the audience to take a step back. They've become used to the term Washington Redskins, but think about what it means and what it might mean if you yourself were a Native American.
Why now?
Because the issue has come to a head. The issue is out there now. You have an active group that is pushing the issue. There's a meeting that's going to take place in the next few weeks between NFL officials and the Oneida Nation representatives. President Obama has addressed it. Roger Goodell has addressed it. It's been editorialized about in the Washington Post and other places. It is now a front-burner issue in the NFL. It's an NFL issue. It's not a random political issue. And Washington was playing, pardon me, Dallas on our air last night. And I'll just back up without rekindling this. Dan, when you referred to my commentary last year as being about gun control, that was a misunderstanding. Okay. It was not about gun control. It was about the proliferation of guns among athletes, where some are illegally obtained. It was, by the way, it anticipated an Alden Smith situation. That's really what it was. Or listen to Karl Malone, who used to be a spokesman for the NRA, who said, look, a lot of these young guys are not talking about having a gun to protect their home and family or for sporting purposes. They view it as a misplaced notion of manhood or street cred, and nothing good ever comes out of it. It was that sort of attitude that I was talking about. And if you gave truth serum to Roger Goodell, to David Stern, to Bud Selig, to Gary Bettman, whoever it is, and said, would you be happy if there was an adjustment on the part of many of your players in their attitude toward guns? And would you be happy in many cases if they never toted guns? In fact, each of these leagues have rules against having guns at any league function or at any league facility, and there's a good reason why, you know what the answer would be. That almost unassailably true sentiment was twisted into an anti-gun thing or a pro-extreme gun control position, which I was not advocating and I do not hold.
He's Bob Costas, Football Night in America, joining us, Dan Patrick Show. How do you answer the charges of using Football Night in America for, what is maybe sports but also social causes?
Nonsense. Dan, I'm surprised. This is so obvious. No, it's a football issue. It's right there. It's a football issue. You guys talked about it on the pregame show to some extent. I didn't catch all of it, but...
No, but Bob, I'm giving you a question based on response, not what I think that it is a sports-related topic.
Of course it is.
I don't have any problem, but people are saying, they have said already this morning, stick to sports. And
people say lots of stuff. People say lots. I'm sure, and I'm not comparing this in importance or comparing myself to any of those who crusaded for a worthy cause, but I'm sure that people said if someone wrote in a New York newspaper in 1947 or prior to that saying it's wrong that there are not black players in Major League Baseball, stick to sports. Tell me who hit a ground ball to short. Don't talk about Tommy Smith and John Carlos and their clenched fists. Don't talk about what Billie Jean King has to say. Don't talk about any of these issues. Just tell me who won the game. There are people that are going to say that. But very often, sports inevitably has intersected with issues that appear to some extent to be outside the field. And on some occasions, sports has actually been the best vehicle for discussing those issues because sports cuts across so many demographic lines.
Yeah, I agree with it. I like that we talk about it. I think so many times we're afraid to talk about race. If you're going to talk about, athletes and, the entitlement and enablers there and, any other walk of life, you wouldn't get away with what Alden Smith did and keep your job. And even with the name Redskins, I think we're seeing, it's not a seismic shift, but I do think we're seeing a little inertia here that I think the commissioner, Daniel Snyder eventually changes the name. I don't know when. I just feel like there's an end game here, and I don't know if you feel the same way or not. I feel like he became his own worst enemy here by making it about him instead of being understanding about what it means, and who it affects. I don't want somebody to tell me how I'm supposed to think, and Daniel Snyder did that with Native Americans, and I think that's where people started to go, wait a minute here. Nobody wants to be told what to think or what to do.
Well, I think he backed himself into a corner by saying never. And by digging his heels in. And when you dig your heels in, it makes it more difficult to give in. He didn't leave himself very much wiggle room. And I'm sure that there are people behind the scenes. The commissioner may be one of them. I'm not going to speak for him. But I'm sure that there are people behind the scenes who are trying to ease him towards some sort of resolution here. But if you dug yourself in and said there won't be any movement whatsoever, this is a non-issue in terms of discussing it, no, never, then it's going to be harder to compromise.
I appreciate you getting up. I know you had a long night, Bob, but did want to hear from you. And
all good. All good.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
That's Bob Costas, Football Night in America.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.